I never believed a house could change a person. But that was before we moved into this one. We didn't move for adventure. We moved because we were out of options. The city had chewed us up and spit us out. Maya had lost her job 3 months earlier after a long medical leave. Migraines that wouldn't stop. Hospital visits that drained what little savings we had left. I was barely holding on to my remote job, working nights to cover rent, groceries, and her medications. Every bill felt heavier than the last. Our apartment was falling apart. Mold in the bathroom, a broken heater, neighbors fighting through the walls. Some nights, we'd lie awake just listening to the sirens outside and pretend the noise meant we weren't completely alone. So when Maya found an old farmhouse listed online for half the price of our apartment, it felt like hope, a fresh start, quiet, nature, a place to heal. The ad said, "Property must remain occupied." I laughed at that. Figured it was some weird rural landlord rule, but the realtor's hesitation when she handed us the keys should have told me everything. She said softly, "The house doesn't like to be empty for long." We moved in the next week, and from the moment we stepped inside, it felt like the house had already been waiting for us. The air inside was cold, not the kind that chills your skin, but one that settles. The wallpaper was cracked, the windows fogged, and yet the house felt awake. Maya didn't seem to notice. She was smiling again, really smiling, for the first time in months. "This place has character," she said, twirling in the dusty light. That night the silence was almost too perfect. No traffic, no neighbors, just the faint sound of wind moving through the trees outside. But it didn't sound like wind. It sounded like whispers, too low to understand, but close. I told myself it was just the house settling. Old wood, old air, old sounds, nothing to worry about. The first few days were quiet. Too quiet. Maya slept a lot. She said the new air made her tired, that her headaches were finally fading. I wanted to believe her, but the house felt off. Sometimes I'd wake up at night to hear her whispering in the hallway. When I asked who she was talking to, she'd just stare at me, confused, like she'd forgotten she'd even been out of bed. One morning, I found her standing at the edge of the porch, barefoot in the frost, staring at the woods behind the house. She said she heard someone calling her name. I told myself it was her medication, or maybe withdrawal from the city noise. Some kind of adjustment. Her doctor had warned me about stress causing hallucinations, and I clung to that explanation. Because the alternative, that the house was doing something to her, sounded insane. Then little things started happening. A door that I'd locked would be open in the morning. The wind chime outside would ring even on still nights. Once, I came home from the store and found every light in the house turned on, and Maya sitting in the dark basement, staring at the wall. When I asked her why she was down there, she said, "I was talking to the woman who used to live here." I laughed it off, but she didn't. Her face was pale, her voice flat. She said she never left. That night, I barely slept. The house made new noises, slow footsteps above us, even though the attic had no floorboards. At 3:17 a.m., Maya turned to me and whispered, "She's in our room." I looked around. Nothing. Just the shadows from the window and the hum of the old heater. But when I reached for Maya's hand, her fingers were ice cold. The next morning, she didn't remember saying anything. She just smiled weakly and asked if I could bring her tea. And for the first time, I noticed the faint bruises around her wrist, like someone had held her there in her sleep. That's when I stopped blaming the medication. One evening, I came home early. The front door was slightly open. Maya wasn't in the living room. The smell hit me, damp, earthy, metallic. I followed it to the hallway. Small, barefoot prints led from the door to the stairs, then stopped halfway up. I called her name. No answer. In the bedroom, I found her sitting on the floor, knees drawn up, her hands covered in scratches and dirt. Bruises ran along her arms and neck, small cuts on her wrists. Her eyes were wide and vacant. She wasn't herself. "They don't like it when I leave," she whispered. Her voice trembled, broken. "Who, Maya? Who doesn't like it?" I asked. She shook her head. "They watch. They... wait." The house groaned around us, floorboards shifting, walls creaking. The lights flickered. Maya shivered violently, and I wrapped my arms around her to keep her steady. Her body was trembling, exhausted from whatever had been happening in the empty rooms. I stayed by her side all night, holding her close. When she finally drifted into a shallow sleep, I noticed the deep, dark bruise forming on her shoulder. She was still here, alive, but changed. Not gone. The next morning, we packed what we could. We left that house behind. But the bruises, the scratches, the haunted look in her eyes, they followed her. Even months later, she flinches at shadows. She wakes screaming from nightmares. And every time we drive past an old empty house, she looks away, as if it might recognize her. I don't know if she'll ever be the same, and I'm not sure I'll ever forgive myself for bringing her here. It will be highly appreciable if you like, share and subscribe, comment your nightmare. I'll make it into a video.